Thank you for joining us for the Alan Watts podcast, Being in the Way. I'm your host, Mark Watts. And today we're going to go back to the origins of this podcast and rejoin the Ram Dass Be Here Now podcast network for a special program that's a mix of Ram Dass and my father, Alan Watts. And it's about the Bhagavad Gita. And first we're going to hear from Ram Dass, a course that he did at the Naropa Institute in Boulder, where he's going to talk about his own experience with the Bhagavad Gita and the different stories and perspectives within it, and how he read each of those. It's really interesting commentary, gives you a very user-friendly introduction to this text. Then we're going to go on to a radio program that my father did as part of the Great Books of Asia. This was in the mid-50s. It was broadcast from KPFA in Berkeley, and it's a really interesting talk. He not only gets into the history and some of the background of the Gita, but he also takes it to its sort of logical conclusion on how this can impact motivation and action. And he also describes a form of yoga, which I have heard him talk about elsewhere as intellectual yoga. But here it's more specifically in the context of what we would call karma, or your doing. This comes about 20 minutes into his presentation, and I think you'll find it very interesting. So today it's the Bhagavad Gita. We're going to start off with Ram Dass, and then we're going to go to my father. This podcast is made in cooperation with the Ram Dass Be Here Now podcast network. Our theme music is by Zakir Hussain, courtesy of Moment Records, and it's from his Rhythm Experience album. And now here's Alan Watts and Ram Dass from the Bhagavad Gita.
I'd like to introduce you to a course entitled The Yogas of the Bhagavad Gita. This course has been given at the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado, which is an institute that was founded by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a Tibetan Buddhist meditation master. And I was invited to come here and teach a course during the first session. The reason I've chosen to teach the Bhagavad Gita, first because it represents, in the most general sense, a tradition that I have been steeped in for some years, namely the Hindu tradition. But equally relevant because it concerns a form of discipline or yoga or method that is very suitable to our predicament in the West at this moment. I should say at the outset, the spirit or the rules of the game about teaching a course and even calling it the Bhagavad Gita, this course is more concerned with a commentary about certain points in the Bhagavad Gita as they relate to our daily lives. The Gita, as I understand it, is a way of making one's entire life a vehicle for becoming conscious or coming into the spirit or coming to God, whatever metaphor you would particularly feel comfortable working with. I think we might consider a moment the issue of figure and ground. When we relate to one another, we relate around forms, and we are talking about concepts and the Bhagavad Gita and ideas. But that is merely the vehicle. That's the stuff through which you and I are relating. And if we keep in mind that the transmission is meta-conceptual, the transmission is a transmission of feeling, it's a transmission of being. That is, all I really understand by teaching that one can share is one's being. You can't, that if I talk about love, but I'm full of hate, you won't experience the love. And it won't do you much good. You'll just end up with a lot of dead butterflies to add to your collection. On the other hand, whatever it is that I've evolved into, whatever words I use, you will experience a transmission of being from one person to another, and that will be useful to you or not, as your heart dictates. So I can understand quite clearly that the work I can do to make this course productive is to remain as conscious and as open as I can be as a being, because I understand this work as the work on myself. This is an exercise in my own consciousness, teaching this course. I'm not a fully realized being. I'm somebody working on myself, just as I assume you are. And we are coming together to on the path to meet, to recognize one another, and to share maps, and to realize that the maps are part of it, but behind the maps, here we are. The Gita is very simply a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. And Krishna is a form of God, an avataric form of God. And we'll talk more later about what all that means. And Arjuna is a very pure warrior. He's a very straight, solid being, a very good person. And this is a dialogue on a battlefield. And in a moment, I'd like to tell you about what that battlefield is from a historical point of view. At a symbolic level, what the Gita is a dialogue between God and the seeker. And the battlefield turns out to be the inner battlefield, the battlefield of our own evolutionary being. So I have suggested to students, and I've certainly done it myself, that you read the Gita a number of times. It's a very small book. It can be read in a matter of a few hours. It can't be understood in a matter of a few hours, but it can be read in a matter of a few hours. But it's kind of fun to read it from different angles. You read it first as a fascinating story of a sort of a melodrama of will Krishna fight, will Arjuna fight, or won't he, and will Krishna convince him, and that kind of, and the unfairness of it all, and you go through all the social, political issues inside yourself about it. Then it's very useful to read the Gita from the point of view of identifying with Arjuna. That is, experiencing, once you have appreciated that the conflict is not unique to a historical period and to a few people, but rather is a conflict that's in each of us. And that the reason that you're even attracted to watching this at this moment is because of the relevance of the conflict inside you, the relevance of the conflict inside yourself. Then you read it as Arjuna with God talking to you. And as if your inner voice, the inner, what the Quakers call the still small voice within, is speaking to you. And you're just open to the way that you're being guided or instructed. The inner guru within is guiding you. The third reading is even farther out, and this is very, very difficult for those of us that have grown up in Western religious traditions. Because the third reading is to read it as if you're Krishna, speaking to Arjuna. That means now you're being asked to identify with God. And that merging of the seeker and that which is sought, the merging of the beloved and the lover, the merging of the devotee and the guru, those two things coming together, is very difficult for most of us. To experience the place in you where you in fact already know all the answers. And that's a very, as you'll see as we get into the philosophy underlying the Gita and issues of the Atman and Brahman, that from what would be called the mystic tradition point of view, You already know every answer you could possibly be seeking. You already are the answer. And so, in fact, when you read the book the third time, you will read a line that Krishna says, and then you'll feel strange about it because how could you have said that? And then you will sit with it. And really, this concerns the method of contemplation. The way you study a book like the Gita is really not reading it through very quickly. That first, but then later you take it shloka or little paragraph by paragraph. And the way I did it was I started studying the Gita in about 1967 in a temple in India. And after I'd read it a number of times, I just sat with, in the morning, I'd make my tea and I'd sit down in a very quiet space and I would take one little paragraph and I'd read it. I'd read it a few times and then I'd put it down and I'd reflect on it. And I'd reflect on it in relation to my life, in relation to my inner being. I just sort of work with it. I'd float around it. I'd come back and read it again. And then I would quiet and quiet and quiet until the words took on a almost inner luminous quality, and they started to become living words rather than just an intellectual exercise. And then usually I tried to keep that particular paragraph in mind on and off through the day so that I could keep relating back what my life was like in relation to that one paragraph. And then the next day I'd read the paragraph I had used the day before again to see how much I had forgotten in terms of my melodrama of each day. And then I go on to the next one. And when you finish the 18th chapter, you go back and start the first one, and you just keep building, because these are books of wisdom, they're not books of knowledge. And our game is now the game of, we are in training to become wise women and wise men, not to become knowledgeable women and knowledgeable men. Knowledge is easy to collect. Wisdom is a matter of being. And you have to steep yourself in wisdom. You just can't grab it and wear it like Joseph's coat of many colors. You have to become it, literally become it. Let me tell you a little bit about the well, before I tell you about the history of the Gita, a few more words about the application. That if you are going to go along with us through these lectures, through this course, I think if you're really looking for the payoff in terms of your own evolution, it really isn't enough to just listen. That's one level. But it's also possible to make the Gita into a very living experience for you in your own life. If you are studying it over a period of time, you may want to introduce this contemplation into your life as you work with the Gita. Those of you that are not familiar with formal methods of meditation may find that you are starting to seek them as ways of deepening your connection after you start to reflect on the philosophy underlying the Gita. You may want to make that connection yourself. You may want to explore your own feelings about giving and receiving things and relationships to other people in view of this philosophy. You may want to find ways to serve other human beings as exercises in what's called karma yoga, which we'll be considering shortly. You may find yourself looking around for other beings who are sharing this journey, because at some point, satsang, or the community of beings on the path, becomes very important. And for those of you that have the opportunity, you may want to set up in your home a special little space that is connected with this quieting and deepening and opening process. I call it a puja table. place, a little puja area. A puja means worship or ritual place. And it might just be a little table with a candle or a stick of incense or one flower or a rock or a bowl of water or a picture of beings who are models for you of what these higher states of compassion and consciousness and presence are about. Picture of Christ, picture of Buddha, etc. That is, it's much more when you're really absorbing the wisdom than just doing a head trip about it. It really is a process of opening your being to the possibility of growth. And you can take your daily life and just the way it is and start to transmute that energy. You can start to get it so that everything in your daily life is feeding in to this enriching wisdom.
In 1925, Mahatma Gandhi wrote the following words: "I find a solace in the Bhagavad Gita that I miss even in the Sermon on the Mount. When disappointment stares me in the face, and all alone I see not one ray of light, I go back to the Bhagavad Gita. I find a verse here and a verse there, and I immediately begin to smile in the midst of overwhelming tragedies. And my life has been full of external tragedies, and if they have left no visible, no indelible scar on me, I owe it all to the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita." In this passage that I've just quoted to you, Mahatma Gandhi was referring to what is perhaps the most famous of all the spiritual classics of India, the Bhagavad Gita, or Bhagavad, the Lord, Gita, Song, the Song of the Lord. It is spelled B-H-A-G-A-V-A-D, Bhagavad, Gita, G-I-T-A. The Song of the Lord in this case being Sri Krishna, who in Hindu mythology is regarded as an incarnation, an embodiment, in the Sanskrit language, an avatar of Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, the personification of the ultimate reality underlying this universe. The Bhagavad Gita was probably compiled about the 5th century BC, and it forms a part of a great epic called the Mahabharata. It's attributed to a sage by the name of Vyasa, and contains a complete epitome of the whole central doctrine of Hinduism known as the Vedanta. It's a very fascinating and to us puzzling fact that Gandhi, preeminently the man of non-violence in modern times, was so devoted to this book. Because the scene with which the book opens is a battlefield, the field of Kuru, where a young prince by the name of Arjuna is riding in his chariot, and Sri Krishna, the incarnation of Vishnu, is his charioteer. As the opposing armies face each other, and the battle is about to begin, and Arjuna is faint in heart, oppressed with the senselessness of this struggle and of internecine warfare. And the Gita says in the 1st chapter, "He was overcome with great compassion and uttered this in sadness. When I see my own people arrayed and eager for fight, O Krishna, my limbs quail, my mouth goes dry, my body shakes and my hair stands on end. And I see evil omens, O Krishna, nor do I foresee any good by slaying my own people in the fight. I do not long for victory, O Krishna, nor kingdom nor pleasures. Of what use is kingdom to us, O Krishna, or enjoyment, or even life? And having spoken thus on the field of battle, Arjuna sank down on the seat of his chariot, casting away his bow and arrow, his spirit overwhelmed by sorrow. And to this complaint his charioteer, the Lord Krishna, replies, Whence has come to thee this stain, this dejection of spirit in this hour of crisis? It is unknown to men of noble mind. Yield not to this unmanliness, O Arjuna, for it does not become thee. Cast off this petty faint-heartedness, and arise, O oppressor of the foes. And to give point to his words, Krishna goes on, Thou grievest for those for whom thou shouldst not grieve, and yet thou speakest words about wisdom. Wise men do not grieve for the dead, nor for the living. Never was there a time when I was not, nor thou, nor these lords of men, nor will there ever be a time hereafter when we shall cease to be. As the soul passes in this body through childhood, youth, and age, even so is its taking of another body. The sage is not perplexed by this. Heat and cold, pleasure and pain come and go, and do not last forever. These learn to endure. The man who is not troubled by these, O chief of men, who remains the same in pain and pleasure, who is wise, makes himself fit for eternal life. Of the non-existent there is no coming to be. Of the existent there is no ceasing to be. The conclusion about these two has been perceived by the seers of truth. Know thou that that by which all this is pervaded is indestructible. Of this immutable being no one can bring about the destruction. It is said that these bodies of the eternal embodied, which is indestructible and incomprehensible, come to an end. Therefore fight, O Arjuna. He who thinks that this slays, and he who thinks that this is slain, both of them fail to perceive the truth. This one neither slays nor is slain. He is never born, nor does he die at any time, nor having come to be, does he again cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, permanent, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Now it's obvious, I think, to those of you who have listened to any other of these programs, what Sri Krishna is talking about here. When I was talking to you about the Upanishads, I explained at several points the fundamental doctrine of the Hindus. And that is that the innermost reality of man is not quite what we who have been brought up in a Christian tradition call the soul. We have an inherited teaching, of course, of an immortal and individual soul, which is the root principle of every human being. But in the Hindu doctrines, the soul is not individual. The soul is supra-individual, or, as they would say in their technical language, the Atman, the soul or self. Self is really a better translation than soul. The Atman is identical with Brahman, and Brahman is the name which they use for the ultimate reality which underlies this whole universe. Now, I don't want you to think of Brahman as a sort of vast blob of perfectly transparent jello, which penetrates the whole world. I think that's what many people imagine when they hear this kind of thing. The whole point of the Brahman idea is missed. When you form any image of it in your mind at all, even jello, even empty space or boundless light, Brahman is what we ourselves really are, what this whole universe is fundamentally and actually. There is no way of thinking about, of imagining that. For the very simple reason that as water cannot rise higher than its own level, thought cannot think what is higher than thinking. It cannot conceive the mind which thinks, and still less the power which generates the mind. Our symbols for, our ideas about this supreme reality are vaguish and voidish, not at all because that reality is vague and void, but because thought and imagination are annihilated in trying to grasp it. The essential teaching which the Gita is trying to convey is that the real center and soul, the basic reality of you and I, is not the superficial consciousness which we ordinarily call myself. What we are fundamentally is this unthinkable source of life and existence named Brahman, the expansive. Nor must we confuse this unthinkable center of our lives with a sort of inert stuff, a so-called blind force. For one doesn't derive life and consciousness, feeling and reason from mere stuff, as if the dead were able to give birth to the living. You know, this notion of blind force as the ultimate reality, which has been popularized by a facile scientism, is merely the result of the fact that when the human mind gets out of its depth, it drowns and vomits up a lot of dead ideas. And so Sri Krishna goes on. He who knows that it is indestructible and eternal, uncreated and unchanging, how can such a person slay anyone, O Arjuna, or cause anyone to slay? Just as a person casts off worn-out garments, and puts on others that are new, even so does the embodied soul cast off worn-out bodies and take on others that are new. Weapons do not cleave this self, fire does not burn him, waters do not make him wet, nor does the wind make him dry. He is uncleavable, he cannot be burned. He can neither be wetted nor dried. He is eternal, all-pervading, unchanging and immovable. He is the same forever. He is said to be manifest, unmanifest, unthinkable, and unchanging. Therefore, knowing him as such, thou shouldst not grieve. Even if thou thinkest that the self is perpetually born and perpetually dies, even then, O mighty armed, thou shouldst not grieve. For to the one that is born, death is certain, and certain is birth for the one that has died. Therefore, for what is unavoidable, thou shouldst not grieve. Perhaps that last passage needs a little bit of interpretation. For to one that is born, death is certain, is a statement, of course, which is obvious enough. But not so obvious to us is, and certain is birth for the one that has died. I should try to explain this a little bit, because it's a passage expressive of what is called in India the doctrine of rebirth or reincarnation. If you will think for a moment of what you were before you were born, you will come to the rather puzzling conclusion that you, before you were born, are impossible to think about. Before you were conceived by your father and mother in the womb, you can't remember anything. You don't even remember darkness, not even a blank. Your background, your past history, right at its beginning, seems to be a state of complete annihilation of your ego, of your personality. And yet, oddly enough, here you are. After you die, you may presumably go again into a state which we can imagine only as complete annihilation, of complete nothingness. And if so, you will, won't you, be in the same sort of condition as you were before you were born. You came out of that state, though. Should you be afraid to return to it? This is perhaps a rather elementary way of expressing the Hindu doctrine of rebirth. But I don't want to give the impression that the Hindu doctrine is, as it is imagined to be by many people in the West, a doctrine of the reappearance again and again in this life of an individual soul. I think it is true to say that according to the strict doctrine of the Vedanta, there is not an individual soul which passes from life to life. The one who transmigrates is precisely this Atman or Brahman, and this is why we have to imagine the state before birth and after death as blank annihilation. Because thought is annihilated in trying to grasp the reality which lies deeper than thinking. The finger that struggles to touch its own tip finds only the empty air. And so Krishna goes on. The dweller in the body of everyone, O Arjuna, is eternal and can never be slain. Therefore thou shouldst not grieve for any creature. Further, having regard for thine own duty, thou shouldst not falter. There exists no greater good for a kshatriya than a war enjoined by duty. I think it is just at this point that we puzzle about this book in relation to Mahatma Gandhi. Let me explain the passage that I've just read. A kshatriya is a member of one of the three great castes of Hindu society, those castes being, respectively, Brahmana, which is the priestly caste, the sacerdotium; Kshatriya, the caste of warriors and rulers; Vaishya, the caste of merchants. And they're roughly equivalent to the lords spiritual, the lords temporal, and the commons of medieval European society. And each caste has its proper duty in life, which in Sanskrit is svadharma. And this is the phrase which Krishna uses here when he says, having regard for thine own duty, for thine own svadharma. Sva, self, dharma, function. Or svadharma is probably best translated into English as vocation. The kshatriya is one who has a vocation to fight. That's his job. Whereas a Brahmin, or more particularly, one who has gone beyond caste altogether, one who in India is called a sannyasin, corresponding in the medieval West to the monks and hermits, those who have gone outside society, they do not have the vocation or the duty of fighting. I think the clue to the problem of the Gita, especially in relation to that great non-violent man, Gandhi, is this. Primarily, Arjuna's objection to taking part in war is a sentimental one. He is unwilling to fight in the battle because of his depressed emotions in regard to slaying his kinsman, or, we would say, in regard to slaying one's fellow man. If one would be a pacifist because one is merely squeamish, and is the kind of person of whom one would say, well, he couldn't even hurt a fly, then surely there is something phony about such pacifism because it is sentimental. This does seem to be Arjuna's objection. And this is why Krishna says, in effect, your objection to slaying is a fear of slaying, a squeamishness to slay. And because of this, you do not have a genuine objection to slaying. If you refrain from taking part in battle because you are frightened of so doing, or because you are sentimental, you are not the kind of person who really has a right to abstain from battle. Now, why does he say this? The reason is that to the Hindu mind, one who abstains from what might be an evil action through fear has not really liberated himself from evil. Krishna would say that so long as our conduct is motivated by fear on the one hand, or by desire on the other, we are incapable of performing a truly moral action. Only those actions are truly moral which are unmotivated. Because if you are motivated to do good by fear, your good may, under other circumstances, be evil. This is the case with Arjuna. He wants to refrain from war for the same reason for which many other people would engage in war. Many people engage in war because they're afraid, and not at all because they hate. The world's situation at the present time might be said to be a situation of mutual fear, where the only reason why someone might start a war would be for fear of the other side starting it first. After all, we all know now that modern warfare is something in which neither side wins. It is then fear more than anything else. Fear that the other fellow should send the bombs over first is what starts a war. And thus you see, fear is no deterrent to war at all. A person whose reluctance to fight is based on fear or squeamishness does not then, in Krishna's view, have the right to renounce it. And you see here, the view is one which would probably commend itself to a man like Gandhi. Because you could turn it round in the other way and say that a person who has to take the step of being a non-violent man, a man of peace, a pacifist, he would have his vocation and his duty to do in exactly the same way as the kshatriya, the warrior. He must not be non-violent on sentimental grounds, but rather because he sees it as his svadharma, that is to say, his vocation in life. And so a moment later, Krishna formulates the principle of action. He says, "Therefore arise, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, resolved on battle, treating alike pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat. To action alone hast thou a right, never at all to its fruits. Let not the fruits of action be thy motive, neither let there be in thee any attachment to inaction. Fixed in yoga, that is to say, in union with the principle, with the self, do thy work, O winner of wealth, abandoning attachment, with an even mind in success and failure, for evenness of mind is called yoga. One who has yoked his intelligence with the divine casts away even here both good and evil. Therefore strive for yoga. Yoga is skill in action." The principle, you see, which he enunciates is to act without attachment to the fruits of action. To do what you have to do without seeking either evil or good from it. Now, this is simply another way of saying to act without motive. It seems, of course, from our point of view, impossible that a human being should act without motive. In our Western way of thinking about ethics, we judge the quality of an action by the quality of the motive. And the whole notion of an action without a motive at all seems to be extraordinarily foreign to us. But as a matter of fact, if there is no such thing as an action without motive, there is no such thing as a free or moral action. Because so long as we have a motive, our actions are not actions, they're simply reactions. Surely it's obvious that our motives are determined by our conditioning, by our environment, our heredity, our social structure. They give us motives, and these motives of the past determine the way in which we act. Now, if my motive for doing good is for the sake of some sort of a reward, whether it's in the ancient sense of going to heaven or the modern sense of being a real person or a regular guy, or whether it's fear in the ancient sense of going to hell or in the modern sense of being a cad, I act motivatedly. And therefore the things which I do by way of moral action are not actually free. If, as we in the West have rather inconsistently but nevertheless rightly insisted, a moral man must be a free man must be an unmotivated man. In Western Christianity it has always been thought that there is only one unmotivated being, and this would be God. In the words of the ancient hymn in the Catholic Breviary, God is creation's secret force, thyself unmoved, all motion's source. God, then, would be the one who would act without motive, who would act spontaneously from himself without having to be pushed around. The point, you see, of the Hindu teaching is that in reality each one of us is that unmoved one, that unmotivated one. The root and ground of our soul and mind is the same as the root and ground of this whole universe. Therefore, one in whom this is fully realized can act in an unmotivated way. In studying the philosophy of the Hindus, we have to get used to the idea that it's really an illusion to suppose that every event is motivated, determined, or caused by the past. What they call karma, or causation by the past, is in fact maya, or unreality. For in the Hindu philosophy, the present of the universe, or the eternal now of the universe, is not the consequence of its past, but rather the past is always the consequence of the present, of the eternal now. It trails behind it like the wake of a ship. It does not stand before it and push it. And thus, it is through the realization that he is that eternal now, not his past, that Arjuna is able to act in a free way, in an unmotivated way, and thus go into battle, not because he is moved to fight by hate, by squeamishness or fear, but because he carries out his appointed place in a society in which it's his vocation to be a warrior. We may think it regrettable that societies exist in which there is a vocation to be a warrior, but let's not be sentimental in this respect also, because every one of us is unable to live at all without killing something. Some of us would like to rule out altogether the killing of our fellow men. But you see, in the Hindu view of life, there isn't this rigid distinction between man on the one hand and animals and plants on the other, which exists for us in the West. Therefore, there are times in the Hindu view when killing is an unavoidable condition of being alive. And this is one of the problems which the Gita sets itself to solve. I have read these selections from the translation of the Bhagavad Gita, that's spelled Bhagavad -Gita, translated by Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, Radhakrishnan. As you may know, Dr. Radhakrishnan is the Vice President of India. The translation is published by Harper & Brothers of New York. It is one of the best of the many translations that I know, and is provided throughout with an excellent commentary.
Thank you for tuning in today for this exceptional recording and this duet between Ram Dass and my father, Alan Watts. I hope you've enjoyed it. This podcast is made in cooperation with the Ram Dass Be Here Now podcast network. You can find the original recording by Alan Watts at the alanwatts.org site. It's part of our classic radio album, which includes a dozen such talks recorded in the 50s. Most of these are actually from the Being in the Way series. The one you heard today was from the earlier series, The Great Books of Asia. But they're all great, very enjoyable, as are the many albums that you'll find at the Alan Watts.
You know, one of the most peculiar and yet most inevitable experiences on the path of awakening is the discovery that you are changing in ways that others around you are not. And this creates a very strange predicament. It's rather like what happens when a caterpillar begins to transform into a butterfly while still surrounded by caterpillars who are quite content to remain caterpillars. Now, I want to talk about this because it's something that almost everyone who begins to wake up will encounter. And it can be one of the most isolating, confusing, and yes, dangerous experiences you'll face. Not dangerous in the sense that you'll come to physical harm necessarily, though that has happened throughout history. But dangerous in the sense that you may lose everything that once gave you a sense of belonging, identity, and security. Let me begin by saying that growth is not comfortable. It never has been, and it never will be. When a lobster outgrows its shell, it must shed that shell and expose itself, soft and vulnerable, until a new shell forms. During that time, it is in grave danger. Every predator in the ocean would love to make a meal of a soft-shelled lobster. But if the lobster refuses to shed its shell, if it clings to the safety of what it knows, it cannot grow. It will remain stunted, confined, unable to realize its full potential. Human beings are much the same way. We outgrow our shells, our beliefs, our relationships, our ways of understanding the world, and when we do, we become vulnerable. We lose the protection of the crowd, the comfort of conformity, the security of being like everyone else. And this vulnerability, this exposure, is what I mean by danger. Now, what does it mean to outgrow those around you? It doesn't mean that you've become superior, or that you're better than they are. This is a trap that many people fall into, and it's a sign that they haven't really grown at all. They've simply traded one form of ego inflation for another. No, outgrowing others means that you've begun to see things that they don't see yet, that you've asked questions they haven't asked, that you've stepped out of the agreed-upon framework of reality while they remain comfortably within it. Perhaps you've begun to question the values that everyone takes for granted. The pursuit of wealth, status, security, the accumulation of possessions, the endless distractions and entertainments that fill up our lives. Perhaps you've begun to see that these things don't lead to happiness, that they're empty promises, that they're symptoms of a deeper malaise, a fundamental misunderstanding about what life is and what we are. Or perhaps you've had experiences through meditation, through contemplation, through crisis, through psychedelics, through some spontaneous opening that have shown you that reality is far more mysterious, far more fluid, far more consciousness dependent than the solid, objective, external world that everyone believes in. You've seen through the illusion of the separate self, or at least caught a glimpse behind the curtain, and now you can't unsee it. When this happens, you find yourself in a very odd position. You're living in two worlds simultaneously. There's the conventional world, the world of commerce and politics and daily routine, the world where everyone is playing their roles and taking it all very seriously. And then there's this other dimension, this deeper reality, that's always present but that most people are completely oblivious to. And you must learn to navigate both worlds. You must learn to speak two languages, the language of the marketplace and the language of the mystic. You must learn to be in the world but not of it, as the old saying goes. And this is extraordinarily difficult because the two worlds have different rules, different values, different ways of making sense of experience. The people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, they're still operating entirely within the conventional framework. They're concerned with their careers, their mortgages, their social standing, their plans for the future. And these concerns, which once seemed so important to you, now seem rather trivial, rather beside the point. Not because you've become callous or indifferent, but because you've seen that there are deeper questions, more fundamental issues at stake. But you can't simply tell them this. You can't sit down with your family at dinner and say, I've realized that the self is an illusion and that we're all manifestations of one universal consciousness. They'll look at you as if you've lost your mind. And in a sense, you've lost the conventional mind, the socially conditioned mind, and you haven't yet fully articulated what you found in its place. So you remain silent, or you speak in hints and suggestions, or you try to find people who understand what you're going through. And this is where the isolation begins. Because the people you've known all your life, the people you love and care about, increasingly seem to be living in a different reality than you are. You're speaking different languages, pursuing different goals, seeing the world through entirely different lenses. And they sense this, even if they can't articulate it. They sense that you're no longer quite one of them, that you've changed in some fundamental way, that you're not playing the game with the same enthusiasm you once had. And this makes them uncomfortable. It threatens them. Because if you can step outside the agreed-upon framework, then maybe the framework isn't as solid as they thought. Maybe their own lives are built on sand. They may respond in various ways. Some will try to pull you back, to normalize you, to get you to be the way you used to be. You've changed, they'll say, and it won't be a compliment. They'll accuse you of becoming strange, impractical, irresponsible, self-absorbed. They'll remind you of your duties, your obligations, your place in the social order. They'll do everything they can to squeeze you back into the box you've outgrown. Others will simply distance themselves from you. They'll find you boring or preachy or incomprehensible. The conversations that once flowed easily now feel forced and superficial. You have less and less in common. The friendship or relationship gradually withers, not through any dramatic break, but through a slow, sad drifting apart. Still others may become hostile. This is particularly true if you've outgrown a religious or ideological framework that they're still invested in. If you were raised in a particular faith and you've moved beyond it, if you've questioned the dogmas and found them wanting, your very existence becomes a threat to those who still believe. You're a heretic, an apostate, a lost soul who must be saved or shunned. This is the danger I'm speaking of. Not that you'll be physically harmed necessarily, though that can happen, but that you'll lose your community, your tribe, your sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. Human beings are social creatures. We need connection. We need to feel that we're part of a group, that we're understood and accepted. And when you outgrow those around you, you risk losing all of that. Now, you might say, well, why not just keep quiet about it? Why not simply maintain the facade, play along, keep your insights to yourself? And many people do exactly this. They live double lives. They maintain the conventional appearance while privately knowing that it's all a game, all a performance. And there's a certain wisdom in this approach. As I said earlier, you don't shake someone awake from a pleasant dream unless the house is on fire. But there are problems with this strategy as well. First, it's exhausting. Living a double life, constantly monitoring what you say, editing your thoughts, pretending to care about things that no longer matter to you, this takes a tremendous toll. You become alienated from yourself, split, fragmented. The very integration and wholeness you've been seeking through your spiritual growth becomes impossible because you're constantly betraying your own truth. Second, it's inauthentic. And authenticity, being true to what you've discovered, is essential to the spiritual path. If you've seen something true, something real, and you hide it, deny it, refuse to live by it, then what was the point of seeing it in the first place? You become like someone who's discovered a treasure but is too afraid to spend it, so they bury it in the ground and continue to live in poverty. Third, and perhaps most importantly, your very presence, even if you say nothing, communicates something. People pick up on energy, on vibration, on the unspoken. If you've genuinely transformed, if you've genuinely outgrown the conventional framework, it will show in 1,000 subtle ways in the quality of your attention, in your responses to crisis and difficulty, in what you laugh at, in what you take seriously, in the way you move through the world. So you're faced with a dilemma. You can't go back, you can't unsee what you've seen, unknow what you've known. But you can't fully go forward either, at least not without consequences, without losses, without a period of profound loneliness and disorientation. This is what the mystics have always called the dark night of the soul. It's the passage between the old life and the new, the death of the caterpillar before the emergence of the butterfly. And it's dark precisely because you've left behind the familiar landmarks, the comfortable certainties, but you haven't yet arrived at the new dispensation. You're in between, in limbo, in the wilderness. During this time, you may feel utterly alone. You may wonder if you've made a terrible mistake, if you've thrown away everything valuable for some nebulous spiritual fantasy. You may long for the days when life was simpler, when you fit in, when you didn't question everything, when you could just go along with the program like everyone else. But here's what you must understand. This loneliness, this sense of isolation, is not a sign that you've gone wrong. It's a sign that you're going right. It's an inevitable stage in the process of transformation. Every hero in every myth must leave the village, must venture into the unknown, must face dragons and demons alone before they can return with the treasure. The treasure, in this case, is your authentic self, your true nature, freed from the conditioning and programming of society. But you cannot claim this treasure while still clinging to the approval and acceptance of those who represent that very conditioning. You must be willing to stand alone, to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be rejected. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This doesn't mean you should go out of your way to alienate people, or that you should be arrogant or superior, or that you should reject everyone who doesn't share your level of understanding. That would be spiritual egoism, and it's just another trap, another form of separation. What it means is that you accept the consequences of your growth with grace and compassion. You understand that people are where they are, and they're doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they have. You don't judge them or look down on them. You simply recognize that you're on different paths, at least for now. And you trust that if you're meant to have community, if you're meant to have companions on the journey, they will appear, because here's the wonderful thing. When you outgrow one level, when you shed one shell, you don't remain alone forever. You find others who have also outgrown that level. You discover a new community, a new tribe, a new set of companions who speak your language, who understand your experience, who are wrestling with the same questions you are. This is why spiritual seekers throughout history have formed communities, monasteries, ashrams, mystery schools, philosophical circles. Not because they're elitist or exclusive, but because they needed to be with others who understood what they were experiencing, who could support them through the difficult transitions, who could remind them that they weren't crazy, that the path was real, that the struggle was worthwhile. But these communities are often hidden, or at least not obvious. They don't advertise, they don't proselytize. You find them when you're ready, when your seeking becomes sincere enough, when your loneliness becomes acute enough, and often you find them in unexpected places, a chance conversation with a stranger, a book that falls into your hands at exactly the right moment, a teacher who appears just when you need them. The key is not to cling desperately to the old relationships out of fear of being alone, but also not to cut ties prematurely out of spiritual pride. There's a middle way, as there always is. You maintain what connections you can maintain authentically. You honor your history, your roots, the people who loved you before you changed. But you don't betray yourself to preserve those connections. You don't make yourself small to make others comfortable. And sometimes, miraculously, the people around you grow too. Sometimes your own transformation becomes a catalyst for their awakening. They see something in you, a peace, a clarity, a freedom, and they want it for themselves. They start asking questions. They start opening up. And then the relationship transforms along with you, deepens, becomes more real, more honest, more alive. But you can't force this. You can't make people grow. All you can do is be yourself, be authentic, be the embodiment of what you've discovered, and trust that those who are ready will recognize it. The rest will fall away, and you must let them go with love and gratitude for what they've given you, for the role they played in your journey, even if that role has now ended. The danger of outgrowing everyone around you is real. You may lose friends, family members, communities that once defined you. You may go through periods of profound loneliness. You may question whether it was worth it. But I can tell you, from my own experience and from observing countless others on this path, that on the other side of this danger is a freedom, an authenticity, a depth of being that makes all the losses worthwhile. Because what you gain is yourself, your true self, not the self that was constructed to fit in, to please others, to meet expectations. And once you've found that, once you've tasted that freedom, you realize that you were never really losing anything real. You were only losing illusions, masks, false identities. The real connections, the real love, the real community, these remain, or they appear anew, deeper and truer than before. So if you find yourself outgrowing those around you, know that you're not alone, even in your aloneness. Know that this is part of the process, part of the path. Know that it's temporary, this loneliness, this sense of being between worlds. And know that the courage it takes to keep growing, to keep being true to what you've seen, even when it costs you everything familiar, this courage is the mark of a genuine spiritual warrior, a true seeker of truth. The caterpillar must die for the butterfly to be born. There's no way around it. But what emerges is so much more beautiful, so much more free, so much more alive than what was lost. Trust the process. Trust your growth, and trust that life, in its infinite intelligence, is guiding you exactly where you need to go, even when the path leads through darkness and uncertainty. Now, here is a rather curious thing. You wake up one morning and something has changed. Not outside, mind you, but inside. You see through the games, the rat race, the endless pursuit of more. You understand, perhaps for the first time, that the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. Yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. And then comes the peculiar problem. The bills still arrive, the rent is still due, the bank account still dwindles, and you find yourself in this strange position, spiritually awake but financially broke. What a cosmic joke this is. You look around and see people who are fast asleep, utterly unconscious, chasing money like hungry ghosts, and they seem to be doing rather well. Their bank accounts are full, their houses are large, their cars are new. And here you are, having seen through the illusion, and you cannot pay your electric bill. What is going on? Let me tell you something. This is not an accident. This is not some terrible mistake in the cosmic ordering of things. This is precisely how it must be, at least for a time. And if you understand why, you will stop fighting it, and you will begin to see the extraordinary gift hidden in this struggle. You see, money is a very peculiar thing. It is not wealth at all. It is a way of measuring wealth, a symbol, a token, a kind of social agreement. Real wealth is the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food that nourishes your body, the shelter that keeps you warm. Money is simply the bookkeeping. But we have become so enchanted with the bookkeeping that we have forgotten what it was supposed to represent. Think about it. Here is a man with $1 million in the bank. He sits in his office worrying about the stock market, checking his accounts, calculating his net worth. He has forgotten to taste his coffee. He has forgotten to feel the sun on his skin. He has forgotten that he is breathing. Ha ha ha. Is this man wealthy? Or is he so busy counting his tokens that he has lost touch with the actual treasure? When you awaken spiritually, something very interesting happens. You stop being hypnotized by the symbols. You stop mistaking the menu for the meal. The recipe is not the dinner. The map is not the territory. And suddenly, money loses its grip on you. It stops being the most important thing. It stops being the goal of your life. This is wonderful. This is liberation. But it creates a practical problem because the world around you has not woken up. The landlord still wants his rent in dollars, not in enlightenment. The grocer will not accept spiritual wisdom in exchange for bread. And so you find yourself caught between two worlds. Awake in a sleeping world, trying to live by one set of values while surrounded by another. Now, let me tell you why this happens to nearly everyone who begins to wake up. The first reason is very simple. When you awaken, you lose your motivation for the game. You see, most people work not because they love the work, but because they are afraid. Afraid of being poor, afraid of being judged, afraid of being left behind in the great race. Fear is the fuel that drives the economic machine. But when you wake up, the fear begins to dissolve. You realize that you came into this world with nothing, and you will leave with nothing. You understand that the purpose of life is not to arrive at death safely with a well-preserved bank account, but to skid in sideways, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, laughing all the way. The terror of poverty loses its teeth. And without that fear driving you, you naturally slow down. You stop clawing your way to the top. You stop sacrificing your present for some imaginary secure future. This is beautiful. This is health. But in a world organized around fear and competition, it means you will probably make less money, at least for a while. The second reason is that awakening has a way of making your old interests fall away. Think about it. Before you woke up, perhaps you were fascinated by climbing the corporate ladder, by impressing your neighbors, by acquiring status symbols. These things gave you energy. They motivated you. They got you out of bed in the morning. But then you see through them. You understand that status is just a game of make-believe, that the corporate ladder leads nowhere in particular, that your neighbors are not paying as much attention to you as you thought. And suddenly, these pursuits feel hollow. They feel like trying to polish plastic cups when you have discovered the mountain spring. You may still go to work. You may still pay your bills, but the fire has gone out of the old ambitions. You are no longer willing to sell your soul for a paycheck. You are no longer willing to spend hours doing work that feels meaningless just to accumulate more tokens. And naturally, this affects your financial situation. Now, here is the third reason, and this one is quite subtle. When you awaken, you become aware of how the money system actually works. And this awareness can make you somewhat reluctant to participate fully in it. You see that the whole economic game is based on fear, on scarcity, on the illusion that there is not enough to go around. You see how it turns people into competitors, into enemies, how it makes them forget their basic humanity. You understand that the person with the most money is not necessarily the most successful human being. In fact, you begin to suspect that the pursuit of wealth often creates a kind of poverty of spirit, a narrowing of consciousness, a loss of the very things that make life worth living. And so you hesitate. You hold back. You do not throw yourself completely into the game because you have seen the cost of winning. This is not laziness. This is wisdom. But it means you will probably not get rich, at least not in the conventional sense. Let me tell you a story. There was once a fisherman who lived by the sea. Every day he would go out in his small boat, catch enough fish to feed his family, and sell a few at the market. Then he would come home, have lunch with his wife, take a nap in the afternoon, play with his children in the evening, and spend the night making music with his friends. One day a wealthy businessman came to visit. He saw the fisherman resting in the afternoon and said, "Why are you not out fishing? You could catch more fish." "Why would I want to catch more fish?" the fisherman asked. Well, if you caught more fish, you could sell them and make more money. And then what would I do with the money? You could buy a bigger boat, the businessman explained. With a bigger boat, you could catch even more fish. Eventually, you could buy several boats, hire other people to fish for you, and become very wealthy. And then what? The fisherman asked. Then you could retire and spend your days resting in the afternoon, playing with your children, and making music with your friends in the evening. The fisherman smiled. But that is what I am doing now. Do you see? The fisherman had not failed to understand how to make money. He had simply seen through the illusion that making money was the point. He's already living the life that the businessman would spend years trying to earn. He was already wealthy in the only way that matters. When you wake up spiritually, you become more like the fisherman. You realize that the goal everyone is chasing is already available right now. The peace they hope to buy with retirement savings is available in this breath. The security they think money will provide is already here in the simple fact of being alive. The freedom they imagine wealth will bring is already present when you stop being enslaved by the need for more. But here is what happens next. Once you see this, once you really understand it, you face a choice. Do you continue to play the money game with full knowledge that it is just a game? Or do you drop out entirely? And this is where many awakened people get stuck. They think the answer is to reject money altogether, to become penniless wanderers. But this is just another trap. This is the ego in spiritual clothing. True awakening is not about rejecting money any more than it is about chasing it. It is about seeing money for what it actually is, a useful instrument, nothing more, nothing less. When you are truly awake, you can use money without being used by it. You can play the game without being played by the game. The question is not whether you should have money or not have money. The question is whether money has you. Can you hold it lightly? Can you use it when you need it and let it go when you do not? Can you make it without losing your soul and spend it without losing your freedom? This is the art. This is the dance. And it takes time to learn. This is why so many people who wake up go through a period of financial difficulty. They are learning to dance a new dance. They are discovering how to live in the world, but not be of it. They are finding out how to support themselves without selling themselves. And during this learning period, there will be struggles. The old ways of making money do not work anymore, because they required you to be asleep, to be driven by fear, to be motivated by greed. But the new ways have not yet revealed themselves. You are in the gap, the space between the old life and the new. And in this space there is often very little money. But listen carefully. This gap is sacred. This struggle is holy. You are not being punished. You are being transformed. The universe is not withholding abundance from you. It is teaching you a new relationship with abundance. Think of it this way. A snake must shed its old skin in order to grow. During the shedding process, it is vulnerable. Its old protection is falling away, and the new skin is not yet hardened. But if the snake tried to hold on to its old skin out of fear, it would die. It must go through the vulnerable period in order to grow into something larger. This is what is happening to you. Your old relationship with money, your old way of surviving in the world, it is falling away. And yes, it is uncomfortable. Yes, it is frightening. But if you try to cling to the old ways, if you try to go back to sleep just to feel financially secure, you will suffocate. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unsee what you have seen. The only way through is forward. The only way out is through. And on the other side of this difficulty, there is a new way of being in the world, a way that is both spiritually awake and financially functional, a way that allows you to have enough without needing to have everything, a way that allows you to work without making work your identity, a way that allows you to use money as a means without making it the end. But you have to trust the process. You have to have faith that the universe is not going to let you starve. After all, the birds do not have bank accounts, and yet they are fed. The flowers do not worry about their net worth, and yet they are clothed in beauty. If nature takes care of every sparrow, every blade of grass, will it not take care of you? This does not mean you sit back and do nothing. It does not mean you become irresponsible. It means you act from a different place. You act from love rather than fear. You work because the work is there to be done, not because you are trying to prove your worth. You earn money because money is useful, not because money is everything. And here is what I have observed. When people make this change, when they truly let go of the fear and start living from a place of trust, money often begins to flow more easily. Not always, not immediately, but eventually. Because when you are not grasping at money, when you are not strangling every opportunity with desperation, you become more creative. You become more relaxed. You become more attractive to work with, more pleasant to do business with, more open to possibilities. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. When you stop thrashing about trying to force financial success, when you stop panicking about every bill, when you simply allow yourself to be present with what is, something shifts. The water begins to clear, solutions appear, opportunities arise. Not because you are trying to make them happen, but because you have stopped blocking them with your anxiety. But let me be very clear about something. This does not mean you will become wealthy in the conventional sense. You may never have $1 million in the bank. You may never own a large house or a fancy car, and that is perfectly fine, because you will have something far more valuable. You will have your life back. You will have your time. You will have your peace. You will have yourself. The spiritually awake person eventually discovers that there are two kinds of poverty. There is the poverty of not having enough money, which is temporary and can be solved. And there is the poverty of selling your soul for money, which is permanent and can destroy you. Better to be broke for a season than to be rich and dead inside forever. And so here you are, spiritually awake and financially struggling. What do? First, you stop fighting it. You stop seeing your financial difficulty as evidence that something is wrong with you, or that God has abandoned you, or that you have failed. You see it for what it is, a transition period, a time of learning, a sacred passage from one way of being to another. Second, you do what you can do. You find work that does not violate your soul. You pay your bills as best you can. You live simply. You ask for help when you need it. There is no shame in this. The universe takes care of itself through people helping each other. Allow yourself to be helped. Third, you trust. You trust that you are exactly where you need to be. You trust that this difficulty has something to teach you. You trust that the same intelligence that grew your body from a single cell, that beats your heart without your effort, that breathes you while you sleep, this intelligence is not going to abandon you now. You are held. You are supported. You are loved. Not by money, but by the source of all things. And finally, you remember what you have already learned. The meaning of life is not in having, or achieving, or accumulating. The meaning of life is in the living itself, in the breathing, in the seeing, in the tasting. You are already rich beyond measure if you would only stop long enough to notice. You have eyes that can see a sunset. You have ears that can hear music. You have a body that can feel the warmth of the sun. You have a mind that can know wonder. You have a heart that can feel love. These are the real treasures. These are what matter, and they cannot be bought or sold. So yes, you may be broke, but you are awake. And that awakening is worth more than all the money in all the banks, in all the world. Because money can buy you many things, but it cannot buy you consciousness. It cannot buy you freedom. It cannot buy you the peace of knowing who you really are. You are not a person who has or does not have money. You are the awareness in which having and not having appear and disappear like clouds in the sky. The clouds come and go, but the sky remains. You are the sky, and the sky is never poor, never lacking, never in need. This does not pay the rent, I know, but it changes everything about how you relate to the rent. It means you can face financial difficulty without losing yourself. It means you can be broke without being broken. It means you can struggle without despair, because you know that your worth is not measured in dollars, and your life is not defined by your bank balance. The spiritually awake are often financially struggling not because they are being punished, but because they are learning something the sleeping world has forgotten. They are learning that life is not about money. They are learning that the real wealth is consciousness itself. They are learning that you can live richly on very little if you are awake enough to see the abundance that is already here. This learning takes time. This learning costs something. Sometimes what it costs is money. But what you gain in return is invaluable. You gain your soul. You gain your freedom. You gain the ability to live in this world without being consumed by it. You gain the wisdom to use money without being used by it. And eventually, in ways you cannot predict and according to a timeline you cannot control, the financial situation often begins to improve. Not because you go back to sleep and start chasing money again, but because you have learned to be awake and functional at the same time. You have learned to meet the practical demands of life without forgetting the spiritual truth of life. But even if the money never comes, even if you live your whole life with very little, you will still be wealthier than those who have everything but know nothing. Because you know who you are. You know what matters. You know that you are the universe, looking at itself through these particular eyes, breathing itself through these particular lungs, experiencing itself through this particular life. And that, my friends, is the real gold. Everything else is just paper. So if you are spiritually awake and financially struggling, take heart, you are not doing it wrong. You are going through what must be gone through. Trust the process. Do what you can. And remember always that the one who is struggling is not who you really are. The real you, the awareness that watches all of this, cannot be touched by poverty or wealth. It simply is, and it is enough. The meaning of life is just to be alive. Not to be rich, not to be successful, not to prove anything or achieve anything or accumulate anything. Just to be alive, to breathe, to see, to feel, to know. And this you are already doing. This you have always been doing. This you cannot fail to do. So play the game of money if you must. Pay your bills, feed yourself, take care.
There are times in life when you feel as though you have wandered off the map. You look around and nothing seems familiar. The signposts that once guided you are gone. The landmarks that once gave you confidence have vanished, and suddenly you are overcome with a strange disorientation. You may call it confusion, uncertainty, or despair, but beneath all those names is a single experience. You feel lost. To be lost is not simply to lack direction. It is to have once believed you knew where you were going, only to realize that the path has dissolved beneath your feet. And in that moment, everything you trusted begins to tremble. The career you thought would define you feels empty. The relationship you believed would complete you unravels. The ideals you clung to no longer hold weight. You stand in the middle of life's forest and see only trees, stretching endlessly with no clear way forward. At first, this can feel like failure. After all, we are taught from childhood that life is a journey with a clear destination, and that our task is to find the straightest route to that destination. Parents, teachers, leaders, and advertisements all hand us maps. They tell us, study hard, get the right job, marry the right person, accumulate wealth, and you will arrive safely at happiness. But sooner or later, many of us discover that these maps are faulty. They do not match the terrain. We follow them diligently, only to find ourselves in places we never wanted to be. And when the map fails us, we feel lost. Yet perhaps this sense of being lost is not the catastrophe it appears to be. Perhaps it is, in fact, a gift. For the truth is, the map was never the territory. It was only a picture, a sketch, a simplified story. The territory itself is always more vast more wild, more unpredictable than any map can show. And when the map is torn away, frightening though it may be, we are at last forced to look at the territory with our own eyes. We discover reality directly, without the filter of borrowed instructions. Consider how a traveler might cling desperately to a guidebook, reading every detail and trying to match it to the streets of a city. But one day, the book is lost, and the traveler is forced to wander. At first, there is panic, but then, slowly, the city comes alive. Sights and sounds emerge that the book never mentioned. Hidden alleyways, unexpected encounters, uncharted beauty. What once seemed like disorientation becomes discovery. Being lost is the doorway to truly seeing, and so it may be with your own life. The disorientation you feel is not proof that you have failed, but proof that you are finally meeting reality as it is. You are no longer shielded by the maps of others, no longer protected by the certainty of borrowed truths. You are naked before the mystery, and though it is terrifying, it is also alive. To be lost is to be free of false guidance, free to wander, free to see freshly. Yet notice how hard it is to accept this. The mind clings to certainty like a child clings to a blanket. We would rather have a false map than no map at all. We would rather pretend we know than admit we do not. And so the moment of lostness feels unbearable. But look closer. The discomfort arises not from being lost itself, but from resisting it. The trees are only frightening because you demand a clear path. The silence is only heavy because you insist on constant noise. If you let yourself rest in the lostness, something begins to shift. Have you ever noticed how silence deepens when you stop straining to fill it? At first it is uncomfortable, but then it becomes rich, almost musical. In the same way, lostness becomes meaningful when you stop insisting on certainty. It becomes a vast openness, a space in which anything is possible. What felt like a dead end reveals itself as the edge of a larger horizon. You are not trapped, you are unmoored, and that is a very different thing. Think of a river. We often imagine it as having a single destination, flowing inevitably toward the sea, but along the way it meanders, branches, doubles back, floods and dries. If you stand on its banks at any given moment, you might say, this river is lost. It is wandering aimlessly. But from the larger view, it is simply the river being itself, finding its way through the land as it must. To be lost is only to be seen from too narrow a perspective. From the broader perspective, nothing is lost at all. So when you feel lost, what is really happening? You are awakening to the fact that life is not a straight road with a fixed destination. You are realizing that all the maps were temporary, that they could never contain the mystery of existence. And while this realization unsettles the mind, it liberates the heart. For then you no longer have to pretend. You no longer have to force yourself into paths that do not fit. You can allow yourself to wander, to question, to begin again. Lostness, then, is not the enemy of life. It is life breaking through the illusions you once clung to. It is reality reminding you that the point was never to arrive, but to move, to explore, to live. To be lost is to stand at the threshold of discovery, trembling perhaps, but also alive with possibility. And notice how, in those moments of disorientation, the smallest details become radiant. When the big picture collapses, the present moment comes to the foreground. You feel the air on your skin. You hear the rustle of leaves. You notice the rise and fall of your breath. The mind, stripped of its maps, returns to immediacy. And in that immediacy, you find a strange peace. For the present moment has no need for maps. It is complete in itself. In truth, you cannot be lost in the present. Lostness always refers to the future or the past. You say, I do not know where I am going. or I should not be where I am. But here, now, you are simply here. The ground supports you. The breath moves in and out. Life continues. To drop into the present is to see that lostness is only a thought, not a reality. And when that thought softens, what remains is not despair but wonder. So perhaps, rather than resisting lostness, you might welcome it. You might see it as an initiation, a necessary stage in awakening. For who has ever truly found themselves without first being lost? Who has ever discovered truth without first seeing the failure of illusion? The very word discover means to uncover, to remove what once covered over reality. Lostness removes the cover, and though the exposure is raw, it is also true. In the end, the feeling of being lost may be the most honest feeling of all, for it admits what is always the case, that we do not ultimately know where life is taking us. The certainty we cling to is a fragile construction. Lostness tears it away and reveals the vastness beyond. And in that vastness, you may find not the path you expected, but the path you needed. When the path disappears beneath your feet, when the signs no longer point the way, and when the horizon stretches endlessly in every direction, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to discover that being lost is not an obstacle to life, but part of its essence. For what does it mean to be found, if not to have first been lost? And what does it mean to have direction, if not to have wandered without one? To feel lost is to be placed at the heart of mystery, where life can no longer be reduced to neat explanations. The truth is, you were never truly in control of the journey. You imagined that you were choosing each step, plotting each destination, and charting each course. But look closely. Did you decide to be born? Did you choose your first breath, your first thought, your first desire? Life has been carrying you all along, flowing like a river that bends and turns without asking permission. To feel lost is simply to realize this, that the river does not always follow your map, but it always flows, always moves, always carries. And so, the moment of lostness is also the moment of truth. It is the place where the illusion of control begins to crack, where you see that you are not the little navigator steering through a dangerous sea, but the very sea itself, with all its waves and currents. The loss of certainty is the birth of freedom, for now you no longer need to force life to conform to your plans. You can begin to move with it, to surrender to its rhythm, to trust that it knows more than you ever could. This is what the ancient sages called wu wei, effortless action, flowing with the grain of things instead of against it. Imagine a dancer moving to music. The dancer does not plan each step in advance, nor does she fight the rhythm. She listens, responds, allows the body to be moved by the sound. In the same way, life invites you to dance with it. Lostness is the silence before the music begins, the pause that invites you to listen more deeply. And when you do, you may find yourself moving with a grace you did not know was possible. Think of how a bird flies. It does not calculate each gust of wind, each eddy of air. It spreads its wings and trusts the sky to hold it. Or think of how a wave rises on the ocean. It does not know where it will crest, nor when it will fall, yet it belongs perfectly to the movement of the whole. To feel lost is to realize that you, too, are like the bird and the wave carried by something larger, included in a pattern beyond comprehension. You do not need to know the way, because the way is already unfolding through you. And here is the paradox. It is often when you stop searching desperately for direction that direction appears. Have you noticed how solutions come most easily when you stop trying to force them? How clarity arises not in the frenzy of thought, but in the quiet of letting go. To be lost is to be emptied of old certainties, and in that emptiness, new possibilities emerge. The openness of lostness is the very ground in which discovery grows. But what is it that we discover in lostness? First, we discover that the self we thought we were, the one who must always know, always plan, always control, is not as solid as it seemed. You believed you were the driver behind the eyes, the thinker of thoughts, the chooser of actions, but in lostness, that image crumbles. You see that thoughts arise on their own, feelings come and go, choices present themselves like waves breaking on the shore. The you who was supposed to be in charge is nowhere to be found, and though this may seem frightening, it is also liberating. For if the little self is not in control, then the burden is lifted. Life can flow as it will, and you can rest. Second, we discover that lostness is not separation but intimacy. When the map is gone, you are no longer looking at life from above as though it were an object to be controlled. You are inside it, immersed, woven into every detail. The rustle of leaves, the sound of rain, the rhythm of breath, all of it surrounds you, includes you, moves with you. Lostness dissolves the distance between you and the world. You realize you were never a separate traveler moving through a foreign land. You are the land itself, the path itself, the very movement of the journey. And third, we discover that lostness is not permanent. It is a season, like winter, cold, perhaps harsh, but also necessary. For in winter the ground rests, the trees shed their leaves, and what seems like death is preparation for spring. To be lost is to enter a season of dormancy, of waiting, of gestation. It is not the end, but the pause before renewal. And when spring comes, when new paths open, you may see that the lostness was not wasted. It was the soil from which new life grew. So rather than resisting lostness, we might honor it. We might see it as part of the great rhythm of existence, the ebb and flow of knowing and not knowing, of clarity and confusion, of direction and wandering. Just as day and night belong together, just as tide and trough are inseparable, so too do foundness and lostness belong to one another. Without lostness, foundness would have no meaning. Without confusion, clarity would not shine. This is why many traditions speak of the dark night of the soul, a period of disorientation and emptiness that precedes awakening. It is not punishment, but preparation. It is the breaking open of the old, so that the new can enter. And so when you feel lost, you may trust that something is ripening beneath the surface, something that will emerge in its own time. You do not need to force it, any more than you can force a seed to sprout before it is ready. You need only wait, trust, and allow. And in that waiting, you may find a peace you did not expect. For when you no longer demand that life provide answers, you are free to rest in the questions themselves. To live without knowing is not a failure. It is a kind of faith, a willingness to let life unfold without clinging. And in that faith, you may find that you are never truly lost at all. You are always here, always part of the unfolding, always held in the great embrace of existence. Look around you now. Notice the space in which these words appear. Notice the sensations in your body, the rhythm of your breath, the subtle sounds in the room. In this immediacy, there is no lostness. There is only presence. The feeling of being lost arises only when the mind insists on a map, on a certainty about the future. But here, now, there is nothing missing. The ground holds you. The breath moves. Awareness shines. In this presence, the idea of being lost dissolves, and what remains is wholeness. And so, when you feel lost, remember this: it is not a mistake. It is not proof that you are broken or that you have failed. It is life guiding you away from false maps, away from borrowed truths, toward the discovery of something deeper. Lostness is not the absence of path, but the opening to a greater path, one that cannot be charted in advance, but only walked moment by moment. You are not lost. You are the universe playing at being lost, so that it may discover itself anew. You are the wave that rises, not knowing where it will fall, the bird that soars without a fixed destination, the traveler who finds beauty only when the guidebook is forgotten. You are the dance itself, and the music, and the silence between the notes. And when you see this, when you feel it, not just as an idea, but as a lived reality, then lostness becomes something altogether different. It becomes freedom, intimacy, and trust. You no longer cling to certainty, for you see that certainty was never real. You no longer fear confusion, for you see that confusion is part of the dance. You no longer resist lostness, for you see that lostness is the doorway to being found. So let yourself be lost. Let yourself wonder, question, doubt, and stumble. For in that very wandering, life is carrying you. In that very doubt, truth is ripening. In that very stumbling, the path is appearing. And in the end, you may discover that you were never lost at all, but always exactly where you needed to be. Not long ago, I spoke with a young man. He sat across from me, leaning forward in his chair, fidgeting with his hands as though still running, even while seated. There was nothing particularly unusual about him. He was not a failure, nor a beggar, nor a saint. He was, in many respects, the kind of man you might pass on the street and not think twice about. He had a decent job, friends who liked him, a family who cared for him. But underneath the surface of his life, there was a deep and gnawing unease. As he spoke, I noticed his eyes kept darting around the room, as though chasing some invisible fly. He told me, I can't remember the last time I felt present. Even when I sit with my child, laughing, I find myself worrying about bills. Even in bed at night, I'm planning the next week, the next year. I don't feel here. I feel somewhere else. And you see, I told him something I'll tell you as well. His story is not his alone. It belongs to every one of us. In fact, I promised him that I would share it, not because his story is dramatic or unique, but precisely because it is ordinary. It is the common story of human beings in the modern world. But I won't tell you the ending just yet, because the part that matters most can only be understood once we take the journey together. The ending only makes sense if you walk with me through the questions that haunted him, and perhaps haunt you as well. So let us set his story aside for now. Like a bookmark placed in a well-worn book, we will return to it before long. Now, let us ask the question, why is it that the present moment, which is all we ever truly have, feels so difficult to remain in? It should be the most natural thing in the world. After all, where else could you possibly be? You are not in yesterday, except in thought. You are not in tomorrow, except in imagination. In reality, you are here, breathing, listening. Life is unfolding before your very eyes. And yet, for some reason, we resist it. We slip away from now as though it was something dangerous. The young man, when he sat at the dinner table with his child, should have found delight in the simple sound of laughter, the warmth of food, the ordinary blessing of being alive. But instead, his mind buzzed with the unfinished tasks of the day, the upcoming worries of the week, the endless pressure to prepare for a life he had not yet lived. And so it is with us. We live in the present as though it were a waiting room for the future. The mind whispers, not this, something else, something more. Why? Why do we resist what is, in fact, the only reality? It is because the present moment is too real, too raw, too unedited. To be here fully means to face yourself without distraction, to admit that this is your life, not tomorrow, not someday, but now. And that realization frightens us, because if this moment is all there is, then there is no more postponing your happiness. There is no guarantee of another chance. There is only this, and that feels unbearably final. So we run, we hide in memory, we build castles in imagination, we live in a perpetual elsewhere, convinced that one day, when conditions are just right, we will finally arrive. But life does not work that way. Life is always now, never then. The young man told me that whenever he tried to sit still, to meditate, or simply to be, he felt restless, agitated, almost as though something was wrong. He couldn't bear the silence. He couldn't bear the presence of his own mind. So he reached for his phone, or switched on the television, or threw himself into his work, anything to escape the unbearable weight of being here. And perhaps you know that feeling too. Perhaps you have tried to pause, and within seconds your mind fills with worries or regrets, or that peculiar sense that you should be doing something else. We call it boredom, but what it really is fear. Fear of facing ourselves. This is why so much of our culture is built upon distraction, endless entertainment, constant stimulation, a new headline, a new message, a new piece of information to devour. Because in silence, in stillness, the truth of now comes rushing in, and we find it overwhelming. But I want you to notice something subtle. To resist something is already to be in relationship with it. The very fact that you feel restless in the present moment means you are already brushing against it. The discomfort is not proof that you are far away, it is proof that you are close. Like standing at the edge of the ocean, where the waves lap at your feet, the resistance is a sign that the water is near. Now, I must pause here, because I want to say something important. If you have ever felt this restlessness, this inability to stay present, you are not alone. And this is why I speak at all. We are building, slowly, a small circle of people willing to look at these questions together, to admit the difficulty and not run from it. If you feel resonance with this, then you are already part of that circle. The resistance we feel toward the present is not simply personal, it is cultural. From childhood, we are trained to chase. We are taught that life is about progress, about becoming, about achieving. We delay gratification, we set goals, we measure ourselves by the future. And so when someone says, be here now, it feels almost like nonsense. It feels unnatural, because we have been conditioned to believe that the real treasure always lies just over the next hill. But what happens when we actually reach the hill? Have you noticed? The goal achieved, the desire fulfilled, the box ticked, how quickly the satisfaction fades. And once again, the mind says, not this, something more. This is the cycle the young man found himself in. He would complete a project at work, only to feel anxious about the next one. He would save some money, only to feel it was never enough. He would sit with his family, only to feel guilty that he was not planning better for their future. The poor fellow was never here, and so he was never at peace. But there is a hidden gift in this recognition. For the very dissatisfaction you feel with running endlessly forward is itself the beginning of awakening. To notice that you are not here, to see clearly that you are resisting, is already a step closer to presence. It means you have begun to wake from the dream of elsewhere. And so I said to the young man, what you seek is not in the distance, it is not in tomorrow, it is not in the perfection of your plans. It is right here, in the very moment you are running from. He shook his head. Of course, he said he couldn't see it. That is natural. Because the truth of this cannot be given in words. It must be discovered in experience. That is why his story does not end here, for his discovery came later in an unexpected moment, and I will share that with you. But only once we have looked deeper into the nature of this resistance. For unless you understand why we all flee the present, his story will not make sense. So let us keep walking. Let us examine together why humanity, for all its brilliance, has built its entire life upon the illusion of elsewhere. For until we see the root of this madness, we will never be free. Why is it that we resist the present moment with such persistence? it is because the present moment is the one thing we cannot bend to our will. You may alter the memory of the past in your imagination. You may plan for the future and dream of what is to come. But the present arrives uninvited, unpolished, untamed. It comes in its own clothing, and it does not ask your permission. To surrender to it is to admit that you are not in charge, and this, more than anything else, terrifies us. Think again of the young man, the restless one who could not sit still at his dinner table. He wanted, with all his might, to be a good father, a good worker, a decent man. These are noble desires. But beneath them was the hidden demand for control, the quiet belief that if only he did everything right, life would turn out according to plan. So when he sat with his child, he was not present. Because presence admits uncertainty, and uncertainty is unbearable for the mind that seeks control. But here lies the paradox. The only true stability comes from releasing our grip on control. The river cannot be conquered by trying to dam it up. It is far too powerful, too alive. The river teaches you only one way: to float, to let go, to allow yourself to be carried by its current. In the same way, the present moment becomes not frightening, but wondrous when you stop resisting its flow. The young man, in his restless evenings, imagined that if he let go of striving, he would collapse into passivity. He worried that if he stopped planning, he would fail his family. "Won't I lose my drive?" he asked. Perhaps you've asked this yourself. It is a common fear. But you see, when you release the exhausting grip of control, you do not lose energy, you gain it. You stop leaking your life force into endless anxiety. Instead, your actions rise up naturally, like a spring bubbling from the ground. You dance, not because you must, but because you are moved by the music itself. Now, pause for a moment and notice something. You are listening to these words right now. This, in itself, is proof that you can give your attention wholly to one thing. You may already feel, however faintly, that something in this reflection resonates with your own life. And this recognition is important, because when you find yourself saying, "Yes, I know this," you are not just hearing me, you are hearing yourself. That resonance is the thread that ties us together. And you see, that is what this little circle is about. We gather here not as isolated minds, but as a kind of quiet community, reminding one another of what is easily forgotten, that there is no someday, there is only today. But let us return to the man, for his story is the key. One evening, after a long day at work, his mind buzzing with the usual anxieties, he sat down to dinner. His child climbed into his lap, laughing about some small and silly thing, as children do. For a moment, the young man's mind began to slip away, drifting back into bills, into deadlines, into plans. But then something remarkable happened. He caught himself. He saw, with piercing clarity, that he was about to miss this very moment. And instead of letting his mind run, he stayed. He simply stayed. For a few breaths, he allowed himself to drop the resistance. And in those breaths, he felt the warmth of his child against his chest, heard the laughter as though for the first time, smelled the food on the table, saw the ordinary miracle of life unfolding in front of him. And he wept. He wept because he realized that he had been running from this for years. The present had not been absent. It was always here, waiting patiently. The only thing missing was his willingness to arrive. When he told me this later, he said it felt like falling into a river, terrifying at first, but then strangely liberating. He discovered that life did not collapse when he let go of control. In fact, it became fuller, richer, more alive than he had ever known. He discovered that the very thing he had been chasing, peace, contentment, joy, was not in the distance at all. It was in the simple act of being here. And this is where the teaching comes alive. For the resistance you feel toward the present moment is not an enemy, it is a teacher. The restlessness, the agitation, the endless chase, these are not signs that you are broken. They are signs that you are human. They are the invitation to awaken. So I say to you, do not condemn yourself for resisting. Notice it. Hold it gently. Realize that in the very act of noticing, you have already stepped closer to presence. The resistance is like the ringing of a bell, reminding you that now is calling. And here is the secret the young man discovered. Once you begin to allow even a sliver of the present in life, rushes in to meet you. You need not force it. You need only stop running. Now, you might ask, what does it mean to live this way? It does not mean abandoning plans or refusing to care for tomorrow. It means not using tomorrow as an escape from today. You may plant seeds, but you do not live in the harvest. You live in the planting itself. You may dream, but you do not flee into dreams. You root yourself here in the ordinary miracle of breath and laughter and sunlight. And the wonderful thing is that when you do, the future often takes care of itself, because the best preparation for tomorrow is not anxiety today, but presence today. From presence, wise action arises. From presence, you respond to life rather than react to it. The young man learned this slowly, not in one grand epiphany, but in countless small moments. Each time he noticed his mind running away, he gently returned, like a father guiding a child back to the table. And each time, he found that the present was not frightening after all. It was tender. It was alive. And so it is with you. The door back to now is never locked. It does not require years of effort. It requires only the willingness to step through it, again and again, whenever you remember. And perhaps in this very moment, you can feel it. The weight of the chair beneath you, the rhythm of your breathing, the simple fact of being alive. This is the doorway. And once you notice it, you are already through. Now, before we close, I want to say this. What you and I are doing here is not an isolated act. It is part of something larger. More and more people are beginning to wake from the dream of someday. And in that awakening, we are forming a kind of invisible community, a gathering around the fire of presence. You may not see the others, but you are not alone. We are all here together in this moment. And that, perhaps, is the greatest gift. Because the young man's story is not only his, it is yours, it is mine, it is the story of every human being who has ever wrestled with the restless mind and discovered, at last, the peace of simply being. So let me leave you with this. The ending of his story is not an ending at all. It is a beginning. For every time you choose to arrive in the present, you begin again, and life, in its inexhaustible generosity, will always meet you here. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a soft drift of shadow at the edge of light. A person who has always seen themselves as kind, honest, and good starts to make small compromises. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. A harmless lie here, a silent hesitation there. They tell themselves, this isn't who I am. This is just what must be done. And in that moment, a seed is planted not of evil, but of self-deception. No one wakes up one morning and decides to become cruel. The transformation never happens in a single act. It unfolds through countless moments when the truth of one's heart is exchanged for the comfort of being right. You see, the mind has a strange talent for justifying itself. It will twist, bend, and reshape reality until it can still look in the mirror and say, I am good. The descent begins the moment a person starts believing that goodness is something they can possess, rather than something they must continually rediscover. For when you claim to be good, you also create its opposite, someone else who must be bad. The moment you divide the world into us and them, The game has already begun. The darkness does not enter as hatred, but as certainty. The truth is, we become what we fear whenever we lose sight of our own shadow. Every human being carries within them both the saint and the serpent. But most people spend their lives denying this. They cling to the idea that only others could be cruel, only others could be unjust, only others could fall. And in that denial, the shadow grows stronger, unseen and unacknowledged, until one day it acts on its own. History, time and again, has shown this. Not through monsters who were born that way, but through ordinary people who stopped questioning themselves. A person begins to follow orders they disagree with because it feels easier than conflict. They remain silent while someone else suffers, convincing themselves it is not their place to intervene. Slowly, the conscience adapts. The voice that once shouted now whispers. And in the quiet, they begin to call obedience virtue. It is not that these people become evil. It is that they lose the capacity to see. Awareness collapses under the weight of justification. Once you convince yourself that your actions are for the greater good, almost anything can be done without guilt. Cruelty, when wrapped in purpose, can masquerade as righteousness. The human mind loves order. It wants to believe that if it follows rules, obeys systems, and respects authority, it will remain safe. But safety has always been a mirage. When a person stops thinking for themselves, when they surrender their inner compass to someone else's map, they are no longer alive in the full sense. They have become a fragment of someone else's idea. And yet, you can't blame them entirely. Most people are not cruel because they enjoy it. They are cruel because they believe they must be. Under enough pressure, fear, or belonging, the line between right and wrong begins to blur. When your survival, status, or comfort depends on silence, silence begins to sound like morality. The mind says, I had no choice. But there is always a choice, it's just that some are more painful than others. The moment you avoid pain at all costs, you also avoid truth. Because truth is rarely comfortable, and goodness is rarely easy. Look closely, and you will see that corruption begins not in grand betrayals, but in tiny moments of self-abandonment. You tell yourself, I'll speak up next time. I'll do what's right when the stakes are higher. But the soul doesn't erode in one collapse, it erodes in quiet increments. A man becomes dishonest the day he starts believing that honesty must wait for a better time. There is another force at work, subtler, but far more dangerous, the need to belong. Human beings will do almost anything to avoid feeling isolated, and so they conform. They agree to things they do not believe in. They laugh at cruelty to avoid being outcast. They obey the unspoken rules of the tribe, even when those rules betray their heart. Because belonging feels safer than conscience. But the cost of belonging, when bought at the expense of awareness, is the slow disintegration of the self. This is why some of the darkest acts in history were not done by villains, but by people who simply wanted to fit in. They called it loyalty, duty, or patriotism, words that sound noble, but can hide deep fear. They forgot that morality is not obedience to authority. It is obedience to truth. When the crowd moves in one direction, the temptation to follow is overwhelming. The human mind, desperate not to stand alone, convinces itself that the majority must be right. It takes great courage to question what everyone else accepts, to refuse the comfort of belonging for the discomfort of awareness. But awareness is the only soil in which integrity can grow. You see, we often think of evil as a deliberate act, a conscious choice to harm. But most evil arises from unconsciousness. It grows wherever people stop noticing what they're doing or why. It creeps in through habit, through convenience, through the dulling of sensitivity. That is how the good lose their way, not through malice, but through mechanical living. The tragedy is not that people fall, but that they fall while believing they are standing upright. The most dangerous illusion is righteousness, because it blinds you to your own shadow. When you believe you are unquestionably good, you stop examining your motives. You stop listening to others. You start defending your identity instead of discovering truth. And so, slowly, the person who once helped others begins to justify harm. They say, it's for their own good. The one who once valued honesty learns to deceive themselves. The one who once stood for compassion begins to believe that cruelty is necessary. And all the while, they continue to see themselves as good. This is the quiet tragedy of human nature, that the very desire to be good can lead to blindness. Because when you cling too tightly to one side of yourself, you create the very darkness you hope to escape. You separate the world into pure and impure, righteous and wicked, and in doing so, you build a prison for your own awareness. Every human being is capable of this. You and I are no exception. The potential for cruelty, deceit, and self-deception exists in all of us. But so does the potential for awareness, compassion, and truth. The difference lies not in what we are, but in how awake we are to ourselves. So perhaps the real question isn't, how do good people become bad? But rather, when do they stop being aware of who they are? Because when awareness fades, anything becomes possible, and not always for the better. If you look deeply enough, you will see that the struggle between good and evil is not a battle between people, but a conflict within consciousness itself. Every person is born with both the impulse to create and the impulse to destroy. The difference between the two is not in the heart, but in the level of awareness guiding it. When awareness sleeps, goodness becomes mechanical. It turns into habit, into performance, into self-image. And when goodness becomes unconscious, it easily transforms into its opposite. What we call evil is often simply goodness without light, action without reflection. It is the mind acting without seeing. And this blindness, this absence of awareness, is far more dangerous than malice. Because the one who knows he is cruel may still awaken, but the one who believes he is righteous will never question his own hand. So how does one remain awake in a world that constantly tempts us to sleep? How does one live without becoming what one fears? It begins with remembering that no one is entirely one thing. You cannot divide yourself into pure and impure, as though light and shadow were separate entities. They are two faces of the same being. To deny the shadow is to give it power. To look at it clearly, to admit, I too am capable of harm, is to take its power away. This is the first safeguard, awareness of your own potential for darkness. When you know that you can be cruel, you also know when cruelty begins to rise within you. You can see it before it acts, before it speaks, before it finds justification. You cannot transform what you refuse to acknowledge. Most people, however, do not want to see this part of themselves. They spend their lives polishing the mask of goodness while the shadow grows behind it. They mistake reputation for integrity, image for substance. But integrity has nothing to do with how you appear to others. It is how honestly you see yourself. The second safeguard is the courage to question your justifications. The mind will always find a reason to excuse its behavior. They deserved it, I had no choice. It's for the greater good. These are the whispers of self-deception. Each time you hear them, pause. Ask, am I protecting truth or protecting my image of myself? Because truth does not need protection. Only ego does. If you notice carefully, you will find that self-deception thrives in haste. When you rush, when you act under pressure, when you obey without reflection, you create the perfect conditions for blindness. That is why all awareness begins in stillness. When you stop reacting long enough to see clearly, life reveals its patterns. You begin to notice the subtle moment when kindness turns to pity, when conviction turns to arrogance, when belonging turns to obedience. You begin to sense how easily the good heart can harden when it feels threatened. Awareness does not prevent darkness from appearing, but it prevents you from confusing it with light. There is also another force, perhaps the most powerful of all, that protects the heart from corruption: empathy. Not the sentimental kind that we offer only to those we like, but the deeper empathy that recognizes itself in others. When you can feel another person's fear, confusion, or pain, you remember that they are not so different from you. It becomes difficult to harm what you can see yourself in. This is why systems that seek to control people always begin by reducing empathy. They divide, label, and dehumanize. They make the other seem distant or inferior, so that conscience no longer interferes with action. But awareness reverses this process. It brings the other close again. It reminds you that behind every face is the same trembling mystery that looks through your own eyes. When empathy returns, morality is no longer a set of rules. It becomes a natural response of the heart. You do not need commandments to stop you from cruelty when you can feel its echo within yourself. The third safeguard is moral courage. Awareness without courage can become passive. It can see clearly, but still choose comfort over truth. True awareness demands the willingness to act when silence would be easier. It asks you to lose what is safe in order to remain whole. This is not about grand heroism. It is about the quiet, ordinary moments when integrity costs you something. When you speak up though your voice shakes. When you refuse to join in cruelty, even when everyone else is laughing. When you admit your fault instead of defending your pride. Each time you do this, you reclaim a small part of your freedom. The strength to do this does not come from discipline or ideology. It comes from humility. You begin to see that you are not separate from those you judge. The same forces that corrupt others live in you as potential. The only difference is whether you are awake to them. This humility gives rise to compassion, not the weak kind that tolerates everything, but the wise kind that understands. When you understand why people fall, you no longer stand above them, you stand beside them. And from that position, you can help. You see, it is not the darkness that destroys the world. It is unconsciousness. The good person who stops noticing, the just person who stops reflecting, the kind person who stops questioning. Evil does not need hatred to thrive. It only needs forgetfulness. But when you remember, when you see something remarkable happens, you begin to sense the fragile beauty of human nature. How easy it is to lose balance, and how miraculous it is that we ever find it. You start to forgive, not to excuse, but because you recognize yourself in every fall and every redemption. If you can hold this awareness, you will see that the line between good and evil is not a wall dividing people. It is a thread running through every heart. The task of life is not to stand on one side of it, but to walk it, awake. And when you walk that line consciously, you discover a secret. The light that keeps you from falling is not perfection. It is honesty. The willingness to look within and say, yes, I am capable of anything, but I choose awareness. So in the end, perhaps good and evil are not opposites at all. They are the two movements of a single dance, the contraction and expansion of consciousness itself. When you cling to one and reject the other, you lose your rhythm. When you see both as part of the same whole, you begin to move freely again. The one who understands this no longer fears his shadow. He can walk through the world without armor, because he has nothing left to defend. He knows that monsters are not born, they are forgotten selves. And when you remember who you truly are, when you see that even your darkness belongs to the light, the monster dissolves. Not because you conquered it, but because you finally turned to face it.